Welcome back to Free to Write. Can you believe we're already at Lesson 5? Thank you so much for sticking with me throughout these lessons. It's my sincere hope that you're taking something valuable away which will help you as a writer. So, Lesson 5 is titled No Comparison, or Working to Become Your Authentic Self. This is one of my favorite topics because it bridges some of the external steps you have taken with the internal reconstruction that must take place. Hands down, envy may well be the obstacle that most stands in your way as a writer. You may not call it envy. You may see the comparisons that you make as good things that help you strive to be better. When your best friend loses 10 pounds, you lose 15. When your neighbor buys a Mercedes, you come home with the newest Range Rover. It used to be called keeping up with the Joneses next door. Such a mindset has fueled our capitalistic society and ruined many good lives in the process. We set ourselves unrealistic and artificial expectations, forcing ourselves to become someone we never were meant to be. Caught in the web of envy and comparison, we are transformed into a shadow self. Especially as an artist, a writer, comparison can be a deadly thing. Probably the biggest disservice my earliest writing champions did, and I'm sure they never meant any harm by this, was to compare me to other writers. When I was told as a teenager that my poems were like those of the great poet Edna St. Vincent Millay, I had several responses. The first was to ask, who the hell is Edna St. Vincent Millay? I immediately went to look her up and discovered that she was not only a poet, she was a playwright too, and wrote prose under the pseudonym Nancy Boyd. She received the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1923, the third woman to win the award for poetry. She was a very active feminist. She also wrote these great lines, "I only know that summer sang in me a little while, that sings in me no more." Suddenly, reading her poems, I felt that I should write just like her, and I mimicked her sonnets and themes. Now, there's nothing wrong with mimicking a great writer. In fact, I often do it purposefully to learn something of how it feels to be a Steinbeck or Hemingway or Millay. The problem arises when I lose myself in becoming them. I lose what it is that I have to say and how to say it. I contract creative laryngitis, and I no longer can hear the sound of my own voice. There are millions of writers in the world, producing billions of words a year. Only some of those will become writers who can support themselves with their craft. Despite what internet marketers try to sell you, that yours will be the next six-figure blockbuster, most writers will have to be content with the satisfaction that comes from writing a story or poem that is authentically your own. I have to tell you, having been a ghostwriter for a spell and an editor, transcriber, and so forth, I would rather be a writer who had to carry a second job as long as what I was writing was true to me, than a person who spews out artificial plots and characters, plastic books, even though they may be making a fortune. But that's just me. Back to the topic on hand. Another obstacle that's gotten in the way of my progress as a writer was being told very early on that I was going to be the next greatest thing. What does that even mean? I took it at 20 years old to mean that I had such great talent that I could expect another great American novel to simply drip from my fingers. I took it to mean I would be written up in history as one of the best American writers of the century. I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Do you know what those compliments did for me? They froze me. I simply couldn't live up. That novel they all liked so much came to a screeching halt. I was struck with massive writer's block, and that particular book never was finished. While it seemed nice enough at the time, that compliment was actually poison. Now, I am all for encouraging writers, especially young ones, but don't set impossible expectations before them. Don't set such expectations in front of yourself. Though they may seem to be helpful, they're actually quite the opposite. They feed the ego, boost pride, but detract from the humility it takes to stay in the race for the long haul. Instead of insisting that I be the next best thing, I like to approach this with the intention of being the best writer I can be on any given day. Another phrase that was tossed out at me was that I was the real thing. What a silly statement that is. Any writer who writes regularly and with consistency can call themselves a real writer. But the real thing? Once again, we're monumentalizing something. What makes one a real writer? Is it the number of books written? In that case, Harper Lee falls short. Is it the amount of money made? Then that must make James Patterson the most real writer of all. Of course, we value some books and authors more than others. Not everyone can write a book as beautiful as Anthony Doerr's All the Light We Cannot See. But does that make my little novel, When the Moon Winks, any less real? In my opinion, a real writer is one who dedicates a portion of every day to writing. There is no hierarchy, or if there is, there shouldn't be. Some writers are just further along the path than others. It doesn't make them any more real. Real is an inside job. I may not have won a Pulitzer Prize, but I know when a poem resonates with a reader, when I have got it right, or when a line of prose strikes just the right chord with someone. At that moment, I am as real as I can be. Back to poetry and comparisons. In my poetry group, my work is sometimes compared to Mary Oliver's. Now, don't get me wrong, I adore Mary Oliver. But when I am told that my poem seems like one of Mary Oliver's, I'm robbed of myself and my own voice. The whole thing about writing for me has been to write to know myself. Imagine if people kept coming up and telling you that you looked like so-and-so, a famous celebrity. Pretty soon you'd be looking for ways to look more like that person so you could enjoy celebrity too. Gradually your ego would take over and your true self would disappear. You would have become a shadow, and all the goodness in you that wanted to come out would be gone because you had settled for being someone else. The same is true of writing. If I let my ego dive into someone else's voice, it is as if I have ingested an alien. As I have said before, there's nothing wrong with learning from other writers. In fact, there's everything right with it. But the real trick is to get quiet enough and focused enough to find your own voice. To hell with being like everyone else. Be yourself, I say. Shakespeare said it best centuries ago. This above all, to thine own self be true, and it must follow as the night does day, thou can't be false to any other man. Being true to yourself doesn't stop with your writing practice. It starts there with your daily morning journaling. It has been my experience that from there, I find out all the other ways to be who I truly am, from the clothes I wear and the food I eat, to the music I listen to, the exercise I engage in, the people I hang with, and the vacations I take, and much more. The more I can get in touch with who I really am, the more productive and happier I am. Experiment with your writing, just as you do with food and clothes and music. No one says you have to stick to one genre or one particular form. I personally write everything and have published novels, short stories, poetry, plays, nonfiction memoir, and screenplays. As Robert Heinlein's crusty character Lazarus Long once remarked, and as I have said several times before, specialization is for insects. Write what you're in the mood for. Write something new to challenge yourself. In the process of all this writing, your true voice will emerge, the voice of a true writer. One last thought from a wise friend. What other people think of you, good or bad, is none of your business. It's what you think of you that counts. To sum up what I have just shared with you: 1. Write from where you are. 2. Write from who you are. 3. Then you'll be right where you're supposed to be. 4. Your voice, your perception is unique in all the world. 5. Be true to yourself. To bust through the block of comparison, experiment with different genres, imitating different authors, until you settle on a voice that is uniquely your own. Be patient with yourself and playful. Stand in a library or bookstore and look at how many different voices are speaking through those books. There is not one way to write a book, except to write it in your own voice. Be yourself. Write your words, no one else's. Until next time.